So today I'm going to be the theme for today is called Thoughts Are Not Facts. So today I'm going to be talking about thoughts and how we work with thoughts, in terms of in relation to low mood and anxiety, how we can work with that in meditation. So the little phrase "thoughts are not facts" comes from the mindfulness-based cognitive therapy course. That's one of the name of the one of the weeks in the MBCT course for depression. So it's a bit of a popular strapline in the mindfulness world. So I thought we should do something about that. So what it means really when it says thoughts are not facts, it means that our thoughts are different from the things that our thoughts refer to. But that we can easily forget that. We can easily get caught up in our thoughts and forget that our thoughts are one thing and what they refer to something else. So I'll just give you a little bit of an example of that. So supposing you have the thought milk. So here we have, here's your thought, milk. Now clearly that is different from the carton of milk itself. Yeah, so you've got two different things going on here. You've got the milk, on the thought of milk, and you've got the actual thing in itself of, in this case, the carton of milk. Actually, some people tend not to have so much concepts. Some people tend to be a bit more visual or images. So you might have an image. So here's your image of milk. Believe it or not, that is your image of milk. So you might have an image of milk, but again, that's different from the thing itself, the actual milk. Now, clearly, it's very useful that we're able to have these concepts. So, when I'm sitting at the table, I can say to someone, "Please, can you pass me the milk?" And I don't get the sugar. Or hopefully not. I actually get this. I mean, of course, strictly speaking, I should say, please could you pass me the soya alternative to dairy milk? Although I don't think anybody actually ever says that in actual speech. So our thoughts in that way are quite useful. But even with simple things to do with thoughts, to do with things like milk, it can sometimes go awry. So, for example, I might think and say, well, the best form of milk to have in coffee is soy milk, and someone else might say, no, it isn't. It's oat milk. Oat milk's better in coffee than soy milk, has better flavour in. So again, once we start straying into opinions, things can start getting a bit difficult. But even then, hopefully that's something we can sort out fairly easily, and we can recognise that, okay, I prefer soy milk, you prefer oat milk, and that's fairly straightforward. But of course, it gets much more difficult when we have, that's a judgment about the milk. When we have judgments about ourselves, for example, when we have thoughts like, I'm no good, or I'm unlovable, or when we have sort of predictions about, I'm not going to be able to cope with this, I'm just going to get really anxious, people will think I'm a fool, all the sort of thoughts that we can have that can occur with low mood and anxiety. Those are the sort of thoughts that can create a lot more trouble for us. And of course, the thing is, when those sorts of thoughts arise, it's very hard not to take them personally. So what I mean by that is we sort of identify with those thoughts. We take them at face value, and we get caught up in them. So what I'm going to suggest is we don't have to relate to our thoughts in that way. So what I'm going to invite you to do is to do a little experiment with me, or a little exercise, I should say, a little exercise with me. Now, you'll be all very happy in the sense that because we're not, when I normally do this, we'd all be sitting in a room together, so you won't have to do it in front of other people. You'll be able to do it in the privacy of your own room, so you can rejoice in that, because it all makes it much easier. So we're coming back to milk again. So I want you to, there's two stages to the exercise. So first of all, I'd just like you to bring to mind milk and see if you can, whether that's dairy milk or soya milk or oat milk or whatever comes first to your mind. When you think of the word milk, just see what comes to mind. See if you can bring to mind that sort of creamy white liquid, and maybe even maybe get a sort of a smell or a taste of it in your mouth a bit. You know, a bit of a so you have a bit of a vivid sense of what's being referred to. So maybe if some of you could put your thumbs up if you've got that, if you're able to do that. Okay, got some thumbs up. Okay, great, fantastic. So what we're going to do now, this is the second part of the exercise, is we're just simply going to repeat out loud the word milk for 45 seconds. So hopefully that's very straightforward. And as I said, it's fine because you'll be doing it in the privacy of your own rooms, but I'll be doing it out loud and you can listen to me. But I really invite you to join in so that you can see what happens. Okay, so off we go. So milk, 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 milk. Milk, 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 milk. Okay, phew. Okay, so the people I've got sitting filming me are almost in tears, weeping at this point. But anyway, so I don't know if you noticed what happened to if you joined in with me. What happened to that sort of almost like texture or sense of that creamy, liquidy substance? So what I would ask for feedback if I was in a room, but I'm going to tell you what most people experience, and then you can do a thumbs up if any of you've noticed that. But mostly, what people tend to find is that the word milk suddenly sort of loses its meaning. It becomes a bit like a nonsense word. Did anybody discover that? Put your thumbs up if you. Yeah, there's a few people. That's right, exactly. So what you've had is, when we started, it was a bit like milk, the concept, the idea, the word, and this substance, the thing that milk in itself, were sort of very closely related to each other. And then we did this funny little exercise, much to the amusement of my people videoing me, and they start to drift apart. So it's like the sort of connection between the word on the one hand, the concept on the one hand, and the thing in itself start to drift apart. So they're no longer so connected. There's kind of like a space between them. And there's a technical term for this. It's called cognitive diffusion, this thing. So you're separating the concept from what it refers to. And that, if we can learn to do that, that is quite a useful skill. So in a way, what I was saying is that on the one hand, concepts and labelings that we do can be really useful. It can be very helpful. But when we get caught up in unhelpful, negative thinking, it stops to be helpful. So it's a bit like thoughts or concepts are very good servants, but they're a lousy master. So when we're being pushed around by our thoughts of our negative evaluations about ourselves or what's going to happen in the future, that's really, really unhelpful. So what we need to learn to do is to start to, in a way, create this kind of separation between our thoughts and what it refers to. So when I start, as I said, I started with this strapline, thoughts are not facts. So when it says thoughts are not facts, what that means is that the thoughts themselves are not the same as the experience or whatever it is to refer to. That's the primary meaning. There's also a secondary meaning, is that often our thoughts are factually incorrect as well. So they're not fact in that way, in the sense that quite often they're just, they're predictions. So we don't know if they're true. They're just judgments. They're not necessarily true in themselves. And we can get a clue to that when we, for example, find ourselves saying something like, I'll never be loved. If it's got a never or an always, that's a pretty good clue that it's probably not completely true. Or when we find we're doing what's called crystal ball gazing, when we're guessing what's going to happen in the future. Again, it's not a fact, it's a prediction or an idea of what might happen, but we so easily take it on face value as being true. So thoughts are not facts in two ways. Primarily, that the phenomenon of a thought is different from what it refers to, but secondarily, it's often factually incorrect. But even if it is factually correct, it's different. The thought phenomenon is different from what it points to. And one of the really great gifts that we can learn from meditation is learning how to relate differently to our thoughts, to understand this difference between thoughts as phenomenon that pop up in our mind and what the thoughts refer to. It's a real gift when we can come to the point when we realize that we don't have to take our thoughts seriously. We can notice our thoughts. If there's something useful there, we can use it, but we don't have to. It can be just like, for example, somebody in the next house has got the radio playing in the garden, something like that. It's just something that's going on out there that we don't necessarily need to give our attention to. Now, clearly that is like all these things, it's a skill to learn. It's not flicking a switch or anything. But just having that idea can make a real sense of freedom. It can be a real point of liberation to realize that we don't have to take our thoughts so seriously. Even the very ones that we so easily get caught up in and can lead to us feeling low or can provoke our anxiety. So, what we're going to do is try and put that into practice in the meditation just now. So, what we'll do is we'll do a period of the mindfulness of breath and body, as we did yesterday. And the invitation is that when you notice a thought arising, just remember that, see if you can just remember that it is just a thought. And see if you can just let it go on that basis. So it's just a thought. It's different from what it appears to or what it does refer to. So it's just a thought. See if you can let it go. Now, if the thought is more persistent, then there's a couple of things you can do. So if you've got persistent, particularly if they're negative thoughts, one option is to notice what's going on in the body at this time. So that's kind of what we've been doing already in some way. So it's like switching our attention from focusing on the probably negative thought onto what's going on in the body. Chances are there'll be some tension somewhere in the body, and we can try and give our attention to that. So shift our attention onto the body in that way. The other possibility is that we can use an image. So if we like using images, so I'll give you two examples of that. So one example would be to imagine that your thoughts are like a leaf on us, or leaves on a stream, and that they just drift off down the stream, down the river. It's a bit like we're sitting on the riverbank and we can just notice our thoughts going off down the river. Another image that you could try, and again, it's something to just play with. Another image you could try is imagine you've got a river and it comes to a waterfall. So imagine your thoughts are like the waterfall. You've got this torrent of thoughts. And what you do is you just step back. If you imagine stepping behind the waterfall, so that all the water is still coming down, but there's a bit of space there. So you just created a bit of space by stepping back whilst it just all goes on.